Good evening, everybody. It's February 27th at 7 o'clock. And this is, we're going to call the meeting of the Warrant Committee to order by a roll call vote. People present here.
Emily McKee, present.
Rizal present.
Steve Callahan present.
Brent Nelson present.
Pete Salvino present.
Okay, so we have a quorum. And we have, unfortunately, we have 4 members who are unable to be with us tonight, but we do have a quorum. So we will proceed with our agenda. Frank, I don't know if you can present the agenda. While he's doing that, just disclose that this meeting is being recorded, will be made available on the Warrant Committee website. As usual, one of the first items on the agenda is the approval of the February 13th meeting minutes. And unfortunately, Beth was unable to get those drafted up, so we'll defer those until our next meeting. And once Frank pulls up the calendar, do you want me to do it? Oh, no. Oh, okay. So take a little bit of time just to walk through what's coming up, because after today, we're moving into a lot of discussion about all the other articles besides the operating budget. And so we've invited, I've set up meetings with for people to attend our meeting on particular days and inform us of certain articles.
So you drew it up.
And I'll walk through that with you. As soon as we get it up. Maybe tonight's agenda really just covers the school operating budget, as well as a discussion of Article 14, the creation of a special ed reserve fund. And then we will get a discussion in education on the article for the MBTA zoning that will happen. And a quick capital budget committee update. And that's some informational items, and that's it. The majority of the meeting will be pretty much the operating budget for the schools and Article 14 as well as the MBTA. Are you going to pull up the calendar or my calendar?
Yeah, I'm gonna do I have to pull up a couple different things because I'm going to pull up Jeff's in Google Slides so he can advance. So then I have to pull up the packet separately. Sorry.
Everybody know where the packet is on for the meeting. It's actually on the Warrant Committee website. Over on the left, you click on Warrant Committee packet. Yeah, we're looking for our meeting material. You can sit there. Yeah. Okay. The next 2 slides. Great. Okay. So this is the updated calendar with really just what we're going to cover. None of the meeting dates changed. Just what we're going to cover in each meeting. We've now confirmed appointments with people and sort of set out sort of a timeline of when we're going to talk about various articles. So tonight, we covered tonight. So our next meeting is March 12th. And the goal of that meeting is to get through all the financial articles besides the operating budget, right? There's a lot of financial articles that we'll get through. We'll have the Conservation Commission. Deb Barrow has confirmed that she's going to attend that meeting and go through their operating budget request, as well as discuss certain articles that are on the warrant that they're sponsoring. And then we'll also have the Park and Rec Department in Katie and Mel will be joining us, and they will talk about their new the article to create a departmental revolving fund. And then on the 19th, and we're back here at this building, and we have some general articles of the town moderator term, zoning enforcement fees. And we will also talk about the dog bylaw. And we'll have the chair of that, Jill, I forget her last name, Jill, the chair of that subcommittee, attend our meeting and give us an update on the effort that committee went through, the meetings, the hearings, the conclusions they reached. And so we'll hear about the dog bylaw that night. We'll also, there's some housekeeping things that are going to take place related to the select board name change. And then on the 19th, we will have Jean Minio in to talk about the citizens petition for the Medfield State Hospital chapel property. And also attending that meeting will be legal counsel, who will also give us an update on some of the issues associated with that article. And then on April 2nd is our public hearing. So those people who are new to the committee, this is the required hearing 30 days out from town meeting, where we go through every article and take public comment. And at the end of that meeting, that meeting starts at 7:30. And at the end of that meeting, because the select board attend that meeting, we've asked them to stick around for our meeting. And we'd like to hear from them on two articles, one related to the Hinckley North Disposition Authority and the Medfield State Hospital Chapel. They can't attend the 19th, but they're gonna provide their commentary to us on the 2nd. And then on the 9th, we have the final version of the MBTA zoning warrant article that we will take up. You're going to hear tonight, it's sort of the 101 version of that topic. They don't have the final version yet. They've been working on it for a long time, but they have two hearings coming up, and right after those hearings, they're going to come to us with the final proposal for that warrant article. And then we have to vote on everything, because on the 10th, they're going to print the warrant.
Wow.
Okay, so that's kind of the time. What do you guys think about that? Is that sound doable?
Totally.
Whatever it takes, Steve.
We do have to have a town meeting and operate the town, so we got to vote on something. And so that's the plan. You know, we don't have meetings scheduled after then, but if we do need another meeting, we could be to be heard in the warrant, and then have another meeting between the 10th and the 6th if we needed to. There's always one or two articles where we can't reach a consensus on it and vote a final vote. So, all right, so that is that's that. Okay, so tonight we have with us Dr. Marsden, Superintendent, Michelle Kirkby on the school committee. Thank you both for joining us. And they're going to take us through the operating budget for the school department.
Thank you, Steve. And I appreciate the flexibility that the Warrant Committee had after that terrible snowstorm we had a couple of weeks ago that we had to cancel everything. Reason number 500 why I don't like to call school the night before, but it got to a point where so many neighboring communities were calling that we wouldn't have staff in the school if we had school that day. So we Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So we ended up having to cancel that day, but that was not one of our best moments, for sure. Made the seniors happy, that's about it. So thank you again for having us tonight. I'm going to go through the FY25 budget and go through some of the pieces that we went through in the public hearing, and then working with Emily and Ed and Michelle. Ed has some spreadsheets and schedules that he wants to go through as well. So we'll hit that as we go through. So one of the things that we did recently in the past year, since we've been in front of you the last time, is we went through a strategic plan process, the entire district, and we rewrote our mission statement, which we're really proud of. And this was part of not only developing a mission statement, but a 5-year strategic plan, establishing core values for our district, and looking at a vision statement. So we had over 20 people on a committee. It was parents and students and teachers and school committee members and administrators, and we worked with a consultant over several months to get this plan put together. And the mission statement was certainly one of our positive outgrowths of the plan. So looking at what we've done so far and what our process is. So the school committee each year establishes a budget timeline for us, and we go through that process earlier in the fall. And then the leadership team meets and establishes priorities on the budget. The principals, directors, department chairs, they all develop their budgets, and then they meet with Michael LaFrancesca and I. We had 21 meetings this year. We sit down and review their requests, and we review their input. And then we meet to develop the FY25 initial budget, which typically happens in December. In December, that first meeting is our initial draft, and we go through that. And then we do our budget hearing at the end of January each year. So that's kind of where we're at right now. The number that we have on this presentation is still the number that we had that night. We haven't changed it based on your guidance yet, because we haven't had a meeting to vote on that and school committee to look at potential budget cuts. So that will come in the beginning of March. Some of the assumptions that we made going through this development of the budget: that our federal entitlement grants will be level funded, that Chapter 70 will be slightly increased. Chapter 70 is always a frustration point for Medfield. We are a hold harmless district, which means that we typically just get $30 more per student. Other districts get a lot more than we do, but there's 214 districts this year that are held harmless. We are one of them. So the first pass, the governor's budget, we have $30 more per student, which equals anywhere between $65,000 to $70,000 each year. Continuation and potential reduction of our full-day kindergarten tuition. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at is a 3-year transition into a full-day kindergarten program that does not have tuition. Right now, parents pay $3,500 a year for full-day kindergarten, and we're looking at reducing that tuition to $2,750 for next year, and then slowly phasing that out over a 3-year period. And then circuit breaker, which is our reimbursement for special education, will be funded at 75%, and that's what it was last year as well. So that's the assumption we made during this process. Our budget drivers are pretty typical. I think every school district, their 80+% of their budget is CBA agreements and contracts with people. We're in year 4 of our current contract with Conley and Excel Collaborative for special education transportation. Certainly you'll see as we go through out of district placements and in district positions for special ed, our drivers, professional development, technology continue to be drivers as we go through as well. So what do we want to do as far as our strategic initiatives in our FY25 budget? We certainly want to maintain our current staffing, continue academic excellence, rigor, and opportunities for our students, transitioning to the full-day kindergarten for all students at no cost, funding professional development around culturally responsive instruction, restorative practices, and literacy instruction, recommendations for increases to special education staffing, implementing communication audit review recommendations, and then supporting the budget capital budget needs that we have in our district. So all of those appear in our strategic plan and all supported by the FY25 budget. So kind of looking at our funding sources, this is FY24, our current school year. So our Chapter 70 aid, the aid that is earmarked from the state, that goes directly to the town, earmarked for education, $6.5 million. The local contribution is $34 million. And then other, which is our grants, tuitions, and fees, is over $5 million, 5.3 in this current school year. So as I always talk about in this presentation, although our budget's 41 million, it really costs 46 to run it as you see it today. And then always want to remind people that the town also has to contribute to Tri-County and Norfolk Aggie as part of their education expense. So looking at funding outside our operating budget for FY25, this is projected. State and federal grants, the biggest one is a 240 grant or 91,142, which are our special education grant. So we're looking at $700,000 there. Our tuitions, you'll see, go down. We have $653,000 projected for next year. In this current year, we're at $724,000. That is the decrease in full day kindergarten tuition. School lunch at $1 million. So you're asking, why is school lunch at $1 million if all the kids get free lunch these days? So although we don't have the cost to purchase lunch anymore, we still have costs that are for employees. But the federal government is reimbursing us for all of the lunches that we serve as long as they meet the requirements. So we're anticipating around $1 million of reimbursement going into the school lunch program, which we've really started to look at doing capital expenses in our cafeterias. We have old ovens, old dishwashers, old everything. So really trying to upgrade capital with that money that's coming from the federal government. Our athletic fees, these are the fees we charge our kids to play sports at $300,000. Undistributed receipts, this is things like parking fees for high school and other things at $310,000 we're projecting. Private gifts and grants, that's our MCP, our PTOs, which are accepted in by the school committee. And then circuit breaker, $730,000 is our anticipated allotment for that for funding outside. And I think it's important to remind the Warrant Committee that we have 59.4 FTEs funded outside the operational budget. So if you take a look at other town departments, you could probably fit a couple of town departments in there that are funded an operating budget that we fund outside the operating budget through those grants and tuitions. Some of the revenue that we have generated for the town, Medicaid reimbursement, although that's a small number in that time frame, we've actually got a lot more than that, which I know that Christine will be talking about as we look at the special education stabilization fund. FY23 and FY24, 22 and 23 turnbacks, $163,000, and then technology reimbursement, $109,000. So that's just, we work together great as a town, and we work really well with the town, and it's important for us to be on the same team and not do a money grab each year. So we look at that holistically and want to support what the town does as well. So looking at the area per pupil expenditures, so this is really an apples to apples comparison of where we stand with other districts. So if you look at around 20,000 is the state average. So we're below state average in per pupil expenditure, and just looking at some of the surrounding communities. So this is all the money spent in education minus transportation, and you'll get a sense of what other places are spending. And we've come a long way in that. We were a lot lower before. But certainly the town has supported us in the last 5 to 6 years with that.
Surprised to see us below Millis.
Yeah. Yeah, Millis was a lot lower before, and they've really increased their spending. So this analysis, now I know that in your materials you have all of the analysis in terms of actuals and looking at every single line item over the last 4 years or so. And I got some feedback from Steve on the presentation. So I think next year what we'll do when we get to slides like this, we'll just make sure that the actuals, the budget, and the request are all in there instead of just the change one. I know you guys have that information, but it probably makes a lot more sense to put it in. So we'll absolutely do that for you guys. So looking at student services and looking at our budget areas, student services, direct services, and policy administration, you'll see that student services is a big driver in this FY25 budget with an increase of 16.2%. Most of those being almost $500,000 in outside placements for special education. With district services and policy administration at 3.7 and 5.7, we'll break those down as we go through the slides. So looking at our sheet here, it's covered. Looking at our student services, you'll see, and again, some of these, when you look at them down here, you say, well, this doesn't really make sense or doesn't fit. We have to organize our budgets by DESE. DESE tells us what we have to do, and it's all based on the end of the year report. So they tell us how to do that. So sometimes you see things that don't really make a lot of sense, but we have to organize it in that way. You'll see that district-wide staff and special education, certainly a driver, 1.2 million, but so is our district tuition and our transportation. So those are areas that we typically do a really good job with our out-of-district tuitions and making sure that we develop programs for kids, and we've done that all along. But we've had a few circumstances over the last 6 to 8 months that require students to have services outside of Medfield, and there's obviously a cost that comes with that. Our district services, so looking at district-wide staff, maintenance, research and development, which is a professional development piece that we do with teachers in the summertime. PD course reimbursement is money that teachers get when they start to take courses, and that's all contractual. And then, custodial expenses, supplies, equipment, et cetera. So that and general education, transportation is 1.6 million. So those yellow buses you see every day going through our district, 1.6 million for next year. Looking at the policy administration, again, organized by DESE, that's how we have to do it. So central office staff, general reserve is money put aside for all non-union staff and their increases each year. Office and support staff are legal. We belong to two tech and accept collaboratives that help us out with services with special education and also professional development and purchasing. So we belong to those as well. And then it's weird that textbooks fall under this. So again, that's all organized. Thank you, Frank. Yeah. Organized by the way DESE has us do that, but it increased to 5.7%. So we look at budgets by school. Come on. Maybe, yeah. It's not moving. As we know, if 80% plus our budgets are tied directly to staff, then you'll see that, here it is, thank you. You'll see that the increases by school are all tied to staff members. For instance, we don't like Blake Middle School more than we don't like a high school more than Blake Middle School. We just have some retirements in Blake Middle School. So that brings the percentage change down. So when you retire from the teacher schedule, you're at a higher level of pay, and we usually replace you with someone at a lower level of pay. So you'll see that we have retirements in both Memorial and Blake that are driving the lower increases in those two buildings. But those are pretty much all tied to staff. And one of the things that I do in the public hearing is talk about how teachers get paid in the different ways. We have a collective bargaining agreement, and then there's also steps and lanes where teachers get a step for an increase in a year. They'll get a lane horizontally if they increase their education. There's also longevity payments and those types of things. So all those add up to the increases that you'll see here. So we broke these down, each building. This is Memorial first by Unit A. So Unit A is our teachers. Unit B is our teaching assistants. And then all other staff is here. So principal office at Memorial will be the principal and the two secretaries in that office. And then the non-payroll expenses here. Again, the increase is at 2.8%. Wheelock School, very similar size school, but they don't have a retirement there. You'll see Unit A staff, Unit B staff, other. Same thing with Dale Street School, similar size school with staffing. And now Blake in the high school have a lot more staffing. So you'll see the Unit A staff for Blake at 7 million, almost 3 million more than what it was at Dale Street, but they have more staffing there. Principal's office there is principal, assistant principal, and two secretaries. And then payroll and supplies, non-payroll, your supplies, equipment, utilities, et cetera. And you'll start to see the utilities at Blake in the high school be a lot more than what an elementary school spent. High school, Unit A staff, even more staff at the high school, 8.5 million for there, 337 for Unit B staff. You'll start to see the utilities here at 440,000. That school is used constantly, as you know, and drive by there. There's always something going on. So utilities are a lot higher there. So total overall budget, 43,183,072 with an increase of over 2 million or a 4.87% increase, which is the same number that we had in our public hearing. However, Michael and I are prepared to present to the school committee options to cut the budget to get it down to what you folks wanted at the 4.7. So we're going to present that to the school committee on March 7th. They can either accept our recommendations or they can keep it at 4.87. But I think that, we'll make a pretty good case why it should be at 4.7 based on your recommendations.
So you got my email, right? Did you get my email? Oh, no. When you guided.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. Yes.
So what does a 4.8% increase do for us? Maintains our current staff and programs. It does fund our obligations and collective bargaining agreements. So we have 5 of those. Teacher Unit A, Teacher Assistant Unit B, Administrative Assistants, Custodians, and Food Service. Adds 2 FTEs. And we did add 1.5 FTEs in FY24 after annual town meeting due to students' needs. So situations come up with special education that we need to add them one of the things that we talk about is, well, how did you do that after town meeting? You had your set budget, you had your staffing. Well, sometimes when we make projections on where a teacher is going to be, like a teacher will say, I think I'm going to be at master's plus 45, but I'm not sure. And then sometimes they don't get that. They don't attain the education that they thought they were going to get. They're 1 class short. So that's additional money that are in the budget that we use to fund those positions. Increases the supplies by 35,000. Increases our transportation, out of district tuition, which is a big one there. You'll see with a huge driver for us this year at 459, and then technology equipment by 27,000. And here's the breakdown. So here's the increased breakdown. So teachers, steps, lanes, percent increase in longevity, 994,000. Teaching assistants increases, 43,000. So the 0.5 athletic director and these 2 positions were in the ESSER grant. So they're now in the operating budget. So those were created by a grant last year. Education team leader is a new one. So that's an interesting one. So we were planning on, all of us, I think, we're planning on opening a new building at the Wheelock site in September 24, which would be FY25. So we did not add these positions the last couple of years, the ed team leader, which is special education position, because we assume they're going to be on the same campus and work together. But it's just kind of untenable now that someone's going back and forth to Dale and it's just not working. So we wanted to add that position 0.5 in there. And then staff not in unit A or B. So that's everyone else that's not a teacher or assistant, everyone else in the district, with 400 employees, their increases equal to 262. And then there's the special education tuitions again, which is a big driver for us. And then the supplies of the district services, the tech and equipment, transportation, and supplies and services. So out of those 21 meetings, there were positions that were asked for by either principals or by department chairs. So these are the positions that did not make it into the FY25 budget, but that were requested. So we don't just kind of look at everything and put it all in there. These were ones that are really important, and we had to make some real hard decisions on some of these. So the adjustment counselor at Dale Street is something that we would really love to have, but it did not make it there. And that was after a lot of conversations with the principal in the student services department. Dale Street also looking for a math specialist to work with students. A 0.5 ETL, which is the educational leader, which we added in the budget for Wheelock at Memorial School. Behavior therapist at Memorial. Blake was looking for a full-time building sub. Someone just came every day and we just plug them in where they're needed. A 0.2 math specialist at Blake. We already have a 0.7 working there. This would make the person closer to full-time, but we did not add that. A 0.4 wellness teacher, which was cut out of the budget a couple of years ago. High school asked that to be put back in the budget. We did not put it in. And then a 0.5 administrative assistant in central office. Christine Power, who's our director of instruction and innovation. When that position was first, before she took it, it was always a full-time secretary. And over the last 10 years, that's been cut. So we think that would be a really good job, a really good position to put back in for Christine and support her in that role. But we did not end up putting that in the budget. So those are some of the positions that principals and department chairs felt were really important for next year, but did not make the FY25. And that's just something that every classroom in the district, every room in the district has this now, which outlines our mission, vision, core values, and our priorities and strategies and our strategic plan, which was, again, as I started with, a really important part of what we did last year. I know Ed wants to transition into some of these schedules. He wants to,
Sure, you do that. It's the top one.
just the red one, yeah?
What is that work?
Maybe be close on.
Here it is.
That's what can't see it.
Oh, yeah, it's right over there.
Oh, okay. Very good. Okay, I want to first begin by thanking Dr. Marsden and Mike LaFrancesca for working with me for many hours and putting up with all my questions for a whole bunch of several meetings at least. But I'm thankful I couldn't have got any of these schedules done without their assistance. So let me get into this. This is a different cut on payroll that I wanted to take because you can break it into its pieces. The total payroll is going, you can see 1,391,000, 4%. And that's consistent with, you look at prior years, up 2.5, 3.5, down 1, up 4, 3. But 4% is generally about where it comes in or a little bit higher. When you get up to the teachers' steps and lanes, you're going up 4.3%, up $1.1 million from last year's budget. And that kind of makes sense in terms of percent because you figure almost half the people are getting 2% because they're a top step. The other half of the people are still on their steps and getting a 4% step plus cost of living, which averages out to 6%.
Does everyone know how that works with the teachers? You know how that, okay. So it's, they get, every year they get a step and then they can go horizontal. That's how that works. Okay.
So the weighted average is usually in that 4.5%. And then I just wanted to break out, there's the paras going up 3.9%, 7%. All of these, as the superintendent said, are all driven by their collective bargaining agreement. There's all the other staff, all the secretaries, and the administrative people, et cetera, going up 3.4%. Broke out longevity, broke out stipends, substitutes, and overtime. So there are many, many components in when you look at it by piece, adding up to that 1,391,000, 4%. When you get down here, you look at the head count by year, and it's interesting. You can see where we are over the years in terms of head count, and it's basically only four different, down 4 people since 2020. If you look at it. When we look at the increases here by teachers and assistants, they're offset. And I'm going to go to the next schedule and get into this a little more deeply. But the bottom of this schedule isn't showing up. And the bottom of the schedule, again, cut off. I didn't realize that.
Sorry about that.
Shows going up 7.8 people. Four of that 7.8 are in the cafeteria. There's two food service people to handle the volume. So that means 3 people are going up in total. So if we can go to the next slide, how do we advance that?
You should.
Oh, that's not it.
Can we go back?
What is that next one?
Maybe the non-payroll.
Maybe non-payroll.
Non-payroll
It
expenses.
said FTE reconciliation.
Oh, FD reconciliation.
Yeah, that's the one that you're gonna put in, Jeff. Did you put the?
Maybe
I apologize. I put the wrong one in.
Put it
You
in.
put the wrong one in.
I
Okay, well,
apologize.
I sent everybody a copy in the email.
Yeah.
But I do have some handouts here that.
I told you I was on Michael's spreadsheet, Ed. I took the wrong one. My apologies.
There you go. There's 2.
Oh, thank you.
So kind of anal about this thing, but we needed to better understand it. And
Thank you very much.
format it for this. So when Dr. Marsden said we have to hire some people this year in 24 to accommodate some of the students that moved in and their needs, you can look in the upper left there. It says during fiscal year 2024, we added that one special ed teacher. We added a half a position, also a special ed teacher, and we added a para. So we added 2.5 people this current year, fiscal 24. And off to the middle columns there, you can see 1.5 for teachers and 1 is a para. And to the far right, you can see the dollars for the teachers and the paras, 165, 36,000. So $202,000. We also hired, we're also looking in the 2025 budget to add a 0.5 team leader at Wheelock. That's the 0.5 that Dr. Madison talked about. So in total, we're adding 3 people. That's how it breaks out. 2 teachers, 1 para. Total cost $225,000 being added to the operating budget. Now, the curve this year is we had people last year in the fiscal 24 budget. There were 3 people that were supposed to be in the budget. But when we couldn't afford that total budget, we said, let's move those people into a revolver, into the ESSER funds. So they weren't paid out of the operating budget last year. They were paid out of the revolvers or the ESSER funds, which is the third.
What's in yellow here?
That's in yellow. So you can see the 3 up top there in the middle grouping of numbers being added to the operating budget this year and coming out of the revolvers. And the dollars that represented are off to the right. So those additional 3 people are costing $144,000 in terms of teachers, $59,000 in paras, or $204,000. So when you add the total increase to the operating budget, you're looking at about $429,000. But from a total payroll perspective, we're spending fewer dollars out of the revolver by not having to spend that $132,000 to $40,000 to $172,000 in 25. So that the net, you're looking at the total payroll, is an increase of $257,000. So I had to do that to make sense of it. But the long and the short of
It's
it,
been a lot of time with Michael. I mean, they did a lot of work.
we had a lot of iterations of
Yeah.
it because it was halfway through that. We went through a couple of meetings before we realized, we really didn't hire those people in 24. We moved them into ESSER. So we had to find all the pieces. So any questions on that as I follow that? Okay. Let's see what we get. Now we're going into the next one is, that's not it.
Go to the next one.
That's not it.
Jeez. Which one would you look for?
They're in the presentation.
I don't know what happens with that.
What happened to them? They're in the handout.
What's it called?
They're in the book. It's called non-payroll major line items. If you look in your book,
Yeah, I have that. If you,
everybody look in their
it
book.
was
It's
in the
in there.
packet that was emailed.
Non-payroll expenses,
Non-payroll
major
expenses.
line items.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
It's -54,000 on the bottom.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
right. So it starts with the special education lines.
Yeah.
And you can look across there and see the total for the tuition for private schools going up $300,000, $302,000, very top line.
Yeah.
23%. You can see the history of the circuit breaker offset right below it. And you can see what's being, what we budgeted in 24, that's 773,000 and 700,000, which we're currently budgeting for 25 as an offset. So that the net for all of those private schools is 914,000 up $375,000. Collaboratives, we have movement there, so we won't have anyone in collaborative next year. So we're saving versus last year, we budget 62,000. And then in the very last line, that's the transportation line, which we're budgeting flat for special ed transportation. So the net of those lines you can see is 313,000. There are still some children at mass schools. Those tuitions are going up 140,000. So you look at the total of special ed incremental costs, and it's that 313 plus the 140. You're talking about $453,000 of your increase year to year is just tied up in in special ed.
Can you, I have a question. Can you explain so the tuition mass schools, can you just explain what that is? How that works?
Basically, the mass schools, there are private schools and there are mass state schools. But if you're placing a person out of district, it could be in one or the other. Correct me.
Yeah.
That's really it. It's just one of them's
So
private.
those are the schools
One of
that,
them
if you remember
state.
last year, there was the hullabaloo because it was 14% increase in 1 year.
Okay.
And fortunately for us, it didn't affect us that much, but other districts, I think of Needham for one, that really got slammed with that because no one, it's typically 2-3% increase, actually 4 this year. But it's usually fairly low and it went right up to 14 last year. It was a big problem.
These are students, these are Medfield students, residents that have chosen to go to another.
No, that's school choice. No, this is special ed, special ed placement.
Special ed.
Yeah, special ed placement,
This
yeah.
is still special
Yeah.
ed. In fact, when I get into the next schedule, we'll get more into this and talk a little bit more about special
Okay,
ed.
so this, even though it's below the
Even though it's
special ed,
below this, in the next
Still part
schedule, I
of it.
put it back in.
Special
I have a question on this though. Earlier it talked about the circuit breaker at 75%.
Mhm.
What's 75% of what on this?
Oh, I get through that in the next
Next
slide.
line, next
Yeah,
line.
that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So we continue to go down there. You're looking at transportation, that this is the Connolly bus transportation going up to the, said, 5.7%, $89,000. That's $1.6 million for about 20 buses. So you're looking about $80,000 per bus per year for that. And this is year 4. When you do those Connolly bus contracts, you usually have a 3-year contract plus 2 additional years, year 4 and 5, at the district's request. And you heard Michael say, I think in a prior meeting, that he does go out and he tests the market in year 4 just to see whether we can get a better price. But it's hard to beat Connolly busing. They always come in with
so is
the
that
lowest price.
contract up
So
after 25?
no, this is year 4. 26 will be year 5.
Okay.
So we'll make a recommendation to the school committee in the spring to continue that, to keep going. And then we'll have to go out until.
Oh, you go 26 to 27.
Yeah,
I mean, you look at the trend there, it's, 5 years ago, it was at 1.2, now it's at 1.6,
Mhm.
a lot.
Right.
and one of the things that's frustrating, I think we've talked about it at school committee level, is that we typically get one bidder. And that's been the way it has been for a long time. You don't get a lot of other companies bidding on that. So there typically is territory, I think, that people bid on. And
I know it's something that you guys have wrestled with, I understand, is bus fees and trying to offset some of this increase. And I don't know where you stand with that, but I guess you haven't taken a vote on it, right?
No, I don't think we've gotten to a point yet where we would be able to take a vote on that. We've talked about it. We've had Michael and Dr. Marson present to us about some of the different options and what that could look like. But I think we're still on kind of a preliminary stage on what we would do in that. We would need to get a lot more, I think, feedback and data from the community. Because one of the things you have to consider is if we do start charging for buses, would people then drive their kids instead? Right? You have to understand the different assumptions that you'd be making when you look at what you're doing to charge. Also, in regards to charging, for bus fees, you have to look at the distance of where children are in relation to the school. And that, I guess, kind of like algorithm we would have to figure out in regards, like, my family, for an example, like one kid I might pay for and the other one I wouldn't have to pay for because it would be required to take that child to school.
Yeah.
So there are those kind of things that we'd have to look
I
at as
imagine
well.
there's a complexity of, you're looking at changing the start time of schools, which might impact bus decisions by families, right?
Yeah.
They use the GPS to do that. And it really is dependent on mileage. It's like mile and a half. It's one of the things.
I'll
You
say,
could have a person on a street, and then mile and a half goes right through their driveway. From the door of the school. They actually do it from the door where they're gonna let them off to your house, and the GPS lines. It's unbelievable. But when you talk about, the fees for that, you're looking at what, $1.6 million, so 10 months of buses, 166,000. I think for the districts that do this, they wind up charging a price that basically offsets 1.5 months of cost.
Yeah.
And it's probably, if you can get 166,000 out of that, you save 1 month, and that's significant.
Right.
There's pros and
Yeah.
cons there, but you know, that's maybe a couple more people, but.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things too is that you can charge for 7 through 12,
Yeah.
tomorrow, if the school committee votes it. You're not required to bus any kids 7 through 12 by law. So
Okay,
they can charge. It gets tricky with the elementary kids
yeah,
and the middle school kids because you could have a situation where you're paying for one kid to go to Memorial, and not the other child to go to Wheelock based on where you live.
Yeah.
So
I'll just say, as a parent, they do an amazing job. So
they do.
Very good. All right, moving on. I like to group all of those costs associated with running the facility, the electricity, the natural, the heat, the water, the telephone, maintenance contracts, et cetera. And you're looking at first line electricity, where it's actually going to go down, budgeted down 50,000 next year. And when you look through the detail line items, you can see some schools are going up, some are down. Mike went through each one, looked at the history, and gave his best estimate as to what it would look like by school. So there's a lot of, that's a net of $50,000 savings.
question on that, how is the assumption of the new, solar panel factored into the 25 electricity?
Well, we'd like to see them actually happen.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for all that. I know the school committee did a really good job last year rushing all that and making sure we got all the votes, and
Yeah.
we're still waiting for it, going through the process. So
So it's-
But to answer your question, you're asking how that will affect utilities costs once we actually have them in place?
Well, I was very, yes, and if it impacted 25, sounds like it's delayed and
it's delayed. Yeah. And Michael went through the entire thing, has the projections on that. We had projections
there
ready.
was savings projected, right?
There's definitely a savings projected, especially long term. Long term is really something. Short term, not a
Short term's
heck
not
of a
so
lot,
bad.
but.
Okay, so I'm just curious
Yeah,
about 25.
Because we talked about that at the
Mhm.
budget hearing.
Sorry.
No, that's what we're here for. So when you look down all of those, you got a couple of other fluctuations there in water and sewer, and going up 10,000 and going down in maintenance contracts. So the net is really driven by the reduction in electricity with 54,000. So your total operations of we'll call running the business is going actually down about 3.7%. Increase the budget, which is good. Technology is another big cost center, if you will, and there's a whole host of.
I think you might have this one.
You definitely.
Now you go to the next one, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see if I have that. Here you go.
Yes.
Okay. And statistic technology. That $10,000 there on software licenses is a new licenses that prevents hackers from entering the system.
Yeah.
And the instructional software is going up 40,000, about 30,000 of that, 29,250 is a reading software formerly paid via ESSER. So now it's moving up into the operating fund, since the ESSER funds now are at zero. We spent them all.
They're all gone.
All gone.
All gone.
All right.
Can I just ask about ESSER fund real quick? Because when you were talking about this, I was a little confused about why these are still negative FTEs if the ESSER fund ran out.
Well, they were
Were they paid ahead?
paid. No, they were paid in 24 within ESSER. So those 3 positions were paid out of ESSER. Those 3 positions are gone from the revolvers. So you're reducing.
Yeah,
They're not there
it's
anymore.
coming out of the revolver.
It's coming out of the revolver.
Coming out of.
Those are the negatives. It's coming out. And they're going
What-
up.
he's just saying net. They're still in there. It's just not net.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
not net.
Yeah.
It's +3 and -3.
Think
They
of
just
them
move.
together.
They just
Okay.
move from one bucket to another. They move from the ESSER funds
To the operation.
into the operational budget.
Right,
So
okay,
the head count's still the same. They were the same. They were hired last year, just paid for out of one bucket. Now they're still with us, and they paid for it out of the operating fund.
okay.
And then he used the negatives to show, okay, well, these were net new this year, I think. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
So But that still
Okay,
comes down to 3 people, 2 and 1.
Mhm.
But we were anal about figuring that out.
No, it's good. It's very clear. It's good.
So if you look at the bottom, you can see the payroll's going up 4%. That's the 35,827,000, up $1,391,000, 4.04%. The non-payroll is going up 600,000, 14. So total of 2,006,000 to 4.87, which we talked about, will come down by about 70,000 once maybe the school committee decide on how we want to cut that 70 grand.
Sorry. I thought I was tracking this whole thing. But on the bottom here, the non-payroll is the 614. It seems like it's going up a decent amount. But on the previous slide, the non-payroll was the one where I thought we were happy, where it was sort of not.
Yeah, that is it.
Well, I mean,
That non-payroll is big piece of that increase is special ed. Right?
it's yeah.
Okay.
This was one schedule.
Let's see where I'm going.
This was one schedule,
Okay.
and if you had it all in one, you never be able to.
So there's a second.
So they broke.
Okay.
So they broke the schedule into. two.
All right, it's over here. We'll
The
get to
last
it.
slide.
I got
this
you.
slide,
Okay.
some of all that.
Here we go.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one because that's when we spend a little bit more time. This is an interesting slide. GR point, Steve, when we take those mass schools and just put them into the regular special eds.
And you had the transportation. So this that 600. This
Yeah.
slide says 450 is special ed.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Right.
writing. I got that now. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's interesting. These are obviously the same numbers you saw on the other spreadsheet. And those are all of the history of the circuit breaker offsets that we've been using in our budgeting for next year. And you'll see those same numbers when we get into the circuit breaker revolver in a few minutes. But what we wanted to show here is, again, that 400, the net number of 453,000 going up 31%. And take a look at the students over the years. You're looking at trouble reading my glasses.
23,
18, 21, 20, and 18. What happened in 24 is you see 20 students, but in 20, those students are aged out on next year, so they won't be there next year. But we will have 18 students because we added 2 students who that came in during this year. So we will have 18. So it's basically 18 versus 18. And then I thought it would be interesting to put down the average cost of each student. And we didn't go out to the decimal places because some students are in there for a partial year. So it could be, the 20 could be 19 and a half or something like that. But it gives you an idea of what it costs for outplacing a student. You send a person to a collaborative, it could cost you $120,000 to send them there, and another $30,000 for transportation. So it could cost you $150,000. If a person has to go out to a residential, 365, 24/7, you're talking in north of $300,000 off. So it's special ed is a very, very volatile area. You don't know who's going to move in and when and what the needs of those people are going to be. And we'll talk a little more about that when we get into the revolver. But at the bottom, I wanted to go over.
There's the 75%.
There's your 75%. So,
But there's a deductible, like an insurance deductible.
yeah,
Okay.
remember, it's like an insurance policy with a deductible. So if it was just for simple numbers, if a student cost you $100,000 and your deductible was 40, it's in the neighborhood. I think that foundation budget per student is like, is in the 40s, always in the 45, 44, 45.
Mhm.
So use 40 to make it easy. So your eligible costs of 100 less the 40 deductible, that leaves you 60, and they're going to pay you 75% of the 60. 75% of 60 is 45,000. So
There's
you'll
always
wind up
a
paying
lag here too. It's always
15,000 there.
next
So in
year.
total, you'll wind up paying 55 out of the 100 in that example. And of course, the difference for each one of them. In this example here, this is the gross numbers. We have tuition after that foundation, after that deductible, if you will, of $1,096,000 in 23. The reimbursement rate 75%. The circuit breaker reimbursement is going to be $822,101, and you're going to get that in 24 because everything's delayed. At the end of every year, the special ed director adds up all those eligible costs, you submit it to DESI. They give you the money the subsequent year. And that's when you see it going into your
Did
revolving.
everybody understand that point? Because we're gonna talk about this later when we talk about the article.
Yeah.
But the way special ed works is it's unique with them in budgeting, right? It's the state makes you submit claims. You have to incur the cost locally when you submit a claim, and then there's like a year lag.
Yeah.
In getting that money back. And you can understand that just, by sheer coincidence, you could have someone move into town
Right.
with a lot of special needs. And you're a year out from getting at least, and you don't get all of it, you get 75% of it back. So it's a tough area to budget for
Right.
and predict, and it's unpredictable and volatile. And we'll talk about it later, but that is one of the reasons why there's this article for the special ed reserve fund.
Just a question here, though, either the 822 or the 1.022 is that something we should expect to see in a 2025 number? But I only see the 700. Maybe
That's in the 24 number. We don't have 24 yet, obviously, because the year hasn't.
Remember, there's a year lag.
Oh, those are really 23 numbers. They're just sort of off the
Yes,
right.
that's why
Okay.
I put it under the 23 column.
Yeah, but it doesn't hit. It impacts the
I see.
24
That
budget,
means
but
that's
it's a year
showing
lag.
the lag. I
Yeah,
see.
And that shows the lag out there.
I see.
Right, yeah.
But this doesn't net out anything above it, or
Well,
it's in there?
we'll get into that in the
Okay.
next schedule. It does net out.
Okay.
This is the money you're gonna receive.
Yep.
The money you're gonna take out of it, is that yellow line up top.
Okay.
So anyways, transportation, that's the second part of the calculation. That only kicked in about, last year, or the year, 2 years ago. 2 years ago.
Mhm.
If you look up above, you can see that transportation was about $505,000, the actual number in 2023. You see under the 23 column?
Yeah.
So that's your total transportation for special ed, but not all of which is eligible. The eligible piece is 351,000. Because they're not going to reimburse you for in-town transportation, it's only for the out of district placements. Last year, they reimbursed it at a 57% rate, so that was another 200,000. So there is $1,022,000, which you will see when we look at the.
One thing I'll say before we get off this page, I had thought this 31% was such a big increase, but if you look back at the prior years, it's almost like a rough average of the last 5 years.
Yeah, but keep in mind that 2020 number enrollment was a lot higher,
Yeah.
right? So you would have, so enrollment was higher, so you had more special ed students.
I see.
And the average cost per student.
Cost per student's
Gone up.
Mhm.
Sure has.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to the next one with circuit breaker.
There's my circle.
All right, now, see the $1,022,000?
Yeah, I do.
That's forecast to come in. So let me just kind of walk through. Remember, basically the way this works, this is the history of the ins and the outs, beginning balances, the new receipts every year. The bottom line there is called direct expenses, is the amount of money that we're utilizing in that year to offset the special ed expenses. And then you come down to the bottom line there of the ending. You go way back there, you can see the negative numbers in those 2 years, 18, 19. That was just an accounting adjustment. The money came in, the fourth quarter payment came in July, should have been booked in June. It could have been booked in June, and it would have been a positive number because you can't go negative. One of the rules of a revolver, you can't go negative. You can't spend money you don't have.
Right.
Not much different than your own budget.
Okay.
So you can go across there and see the ending balances in that 200, 350 range. And we're projecting right now that we will end 2024 with 217,000. Now, the budget is either $1,091,000.
Yeah,
The budget was 773,000.
that was my question. Okay.
And the year before, on that $1,016,000, the budget was 700,000.
So it's an estimate.
Well,
But
it's
it's not very accurate.
No.
it's your best, it's your best estimate at the time. It's what you think you're gonna need,
Got it.
you know, you get a balanced budget. But this is such a volatile area, conditions change, and consequently, you have to use more of the circuit breaker funds in order to offset expenses. So those numbers at the bottom, you'll see, you know, those are the numbers that are on the prior schedule as utilization that offset the expenses. So going forward, we're gonna open up 25 with $217,000. Right now, it looks like Mike was very, very conservative here. We just have receipts of 730,000. When we do the numbers, there's probably about 200,000 more that we're gonna get from transportation. However, at this point, Mike was kind of reluctant to put that in because there have been so many extraordinary relief claims throughout Massachusetts this year that some of those funds that they would have used might have to be used for that. So you may not get the 57% reimbursement. We'll get something.
Yeah, I think we talked about with 9C cuts happening too. You just don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know where
Yeah.
the money's
So
going to be.
it's conservative. So if we didn't get anything and, you know, and use 700,000, we'd wind up with 247.
Yeah.
If we get as much as 200,000, which if we have the same reimbursement rate, we'd probably be at 447. Yeah. But this also ties into the discussion that we're going to have later on that article, because the question becomes, how much is enough?
Yeah.
What should that balance be? Because when we talk about this emergency relief fund in this article, we're talking about that as a fail-safe. That's for emergencies only. So you're going to have to cover within your own volatility within this account to account for other, you know,
So you want to,
movements.
it's almost like I sort of look at this, it's like, you gotta try to manage this for circuit breaker to have a balance in it. It needs to happen really probably.
I would,
I think
yeah.
it seems like we haven't been there historically, and as you can see that we're getting into really volatile periods here. You know, you know, we'll talk about the circuit. We'll talk about the article once we get through all this operating budget stuff. But
So when you look at that, and you'll say you have 447, and then next year you have another $300,000 surprise. You need to move that 700,000 you thought you were going to commit to offset it to $1 million, and now that 447 is down to 147. You get perilously close. So how much you should have in that reserve? Remember that the DESI says you can carry over the prior year's receipts. So we could carry over $1,022,000.
Right.
That would be the ceiling on what we could retain. And
We never had that luxury.
but I know, but I do think that over the years that 247, that's clearly not enough. And this is it's a great idea. And I applaud Steve and Christine and everyone for coming up with this reserve, because we're going to need the belts and suspenders, I think, at times, because it's getting more and more volatile with movements. So, but step number one is, I think, as an objective, we're going to love to try to bring that balance in this account up so we can handle some of the surprises.
this, I agree with you that this is, the assumption here is very conservative.
It is.
I think the chances of the state giving us 0% on transportation is pretty low.
Yeah,
I think they've been on a mission to get it up, So last year was 57%, so I don't think you're gonna go back to 0, but you never know. You can't guarantee that, but so I do think it's very conservative, but
yeah, it is. I mean, again, it could be 447, but then,
right.
we'll see. All right. So that's that. The next one is really, Mike had that in here, and I wish he was here to speak to it. This is about he wanted to show the food service and Superintendent Marson already talked about this, and you can see the revenue going down year to year because the reimbursement rate has gone down from the state. So it went from $1,491,000 in 23 down to $1 million, and we're just forecast $1 million going out. But we're having a windfall here. You look way back to 2018 and 2019 and 2020, look how little money we had in that account. We were almost going bankrupt here, $15,000. Right? So, you know, if you were running a business, you look at 2021 actual and you had $508,000 in revenue and you only spent $15,000 profit, you'd be concerned. So it's the same with this. So we've had this windfall from the state and we're going to use that windfall. You can see that last line item of capital. We're going to start replacing all of the stoves and dishwashers, et cetera, and use that to fund capital expenditures. So this is great from Medfield. It's been great for a lot of districts in Massachusetts because everybody had been struggling with this account. A revolve is these are many businesses and they're supposed to pay not only for their operating expenses, but for their capital improvements as well. And this account across the state has been one that's troubled everybody because there's never enough money to fund your capital until now. So that's it, I think.
That was the last one.
That was the last one.
Any questions on the operating budget? Anything that we didn't cover that anybody wants to talk about?
Can you just clarify the 4.7 versus 4.76, whatever that was?
So as you know, at our last meeting,
Yeah.
we voted on the 4.7 for the schools, and said any request above that would require an override.
Yeah.
So the 4.7 keeps us within the Prop 2 framework. So the final budget of the school committee tonight, you know, because the school committee hasn't had a chance to meet since our meeting. So they are going to meet next week, I guess. And Jeff has a few options to close the gap of what was it, like $70,000 to, so we are expecting that you will get to that number somehow within your three options. And that we will have a balanced budget to take to town meeting. Does that answer your question? Okay. So we want to talk about the next agenda item, which is the Article 14. So
Sorry, I have extra slides.
I'm sorry.
At the end. No, they're at the end, just in case questions come up.
Yeah,
and want to go at it.
yeah.
So I'm not going to go over any of this. I'm just trying to get to the end, but so Frank, you can do what you need to do.
Is the special education reserve in this one, or do you want to?
No, you can X out, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
thank you very much. That was very good, Jeff.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
Ed,
Thank you, Ed.
yes.
You're both of you.
Thank you. And Michael is not feeling well, so that's why he's not here, but he would be here alongside all of us here, giving information. He's just not feeling well for this.
Steve, do you want me to just pull up the draft?
Yeah, the
Special
draft
education.
article would be good.
Okay.
So I think it's important to have a conversation about this. Christine, I don't know, do you want to talk about this or do you want me to? Christine has drafted up an article for the creation of the Special Education Reserve Fund. There's actually a provision in our in the state law for this type of a fund. And the research that's been done by Christine and Frank and Jeff is that there's quite a few communities that use this, in their fiscal management of special ed. And the way it works is basically there's a number of provisions that are in the law. But one of them is that the fund can be set up with a vote at a town meeting, and then you appropriate money into it and with a vote at town meeting, and then to take money out of it, the funds distributed from the fund. It's a majority vote of the school committee and a majority vote of the select board only. So it doesn't go back to town meeting for a disbursement. It's left with those two committees. And then there is a provision that caps the balance in the fund at 2% of the annual net school spending amount that's established for the school district. So, I think that's the actual I think we put it in the material. This is the actual article, and I think that Ed and I were talking, and we felt, and we actually talked with Jeff, and he felt the same way, that it's important to have some parameters around sort of managing this fund, so that if you do end up putting money into it, what are the circumstances which go to both committees, almost like a financial policy. And so
If I'm passing, you ask me to do the rules.
yeah. That means.
Yep, I'm trying to right now.
Okay, that's better. No.
So I took a pass
No,
and
I'm on mute.
saying what would be the rules of engagement to get these funds, because remember, first and foremost, this is an emergency reserve, only used when you have to. So what I wrote here, you can see, you can read it. The schools can only request a transfer from this reserve when their current year, I'm sorry, I messed that up already. You have to be 25% more than last year's circuit breaker eligible costs. So if you spent $1 million last year, it has to be $1,250,000. And then the process would be, so you have to have those two criteria, and B, the schools have to apply for emergency relief with the Department of Elementary Education. So you have to file, and you have to meet the criteria. So if you meet the criteria and don't file, it doesn't do anything good. You have to do both. When these conditions are met, you should concurrently apply for the emergency relief with DESE and apply to the school committee, the select board, for a transfer of funds in case the DESE does not approve the emergency relief. So as a practical matter, you do both, you do them concurrently. So you go to the board there and the school committee and say, this is what's coming down the pipe. Apply for emergency relief. If we get it, terrific, you don't have to worry about it. But if we don't get it, then we're going to be coming back to you to see if we can be reimbursed from this special ed reserve fund. So again, if DESE approves the emergency relief, the funds will be used in the current year, because they have to use it in the current year to offset those incremental special ed costs. If the request was denied by DESE, then the schools would request the needed funds from the special reserve fund. And if approved by the school committee again, they transfer the amounts prior to year end and apply it to the incremental costs of special ed. Because get denied, especially from DESI, and you get denied by this board, then the schools have to figure out how are we going to cover this exposure within the budget, which would be very tough to do. So it's constantly, you're constantly looking forward when you're in Mike's position to see, what's it look like down the pike, so you can initiate this process early in the year. So God forbid you had to do something, you'd have some time to react.
Because, the benefit of this type of reserve fund is that, and it's important to go through and understand the process and the triggers on it, but that you don't have to, you don't have to call a special town meeting.
Yeah.
If you have an issue, you can rely on your elected official to make the right decision. But we are recommending that, the way this works is the real trigger is that they've made a decision to apply for extraordinary relief. They've met the criteria, which is 25% increment, right? So their costs have gone up 25%. And they have IEP plans for identified students. Then they make that decision to apply for extraordinary relief. All that has to happen before they come to the committees.
Right.
And ask for money out of this reserve fund.
Yeah.
So it's really incumbent on, it's still incumbent on the school department to manage this as best they can. And that's only if they get to a real, this is like a last resort, I guess, that they can't, we've just had some late kids move into town and it's the law, we have to comply with it and deal with it. So that's the purpose of this fund is to, yes.
Where does the money, what
Yeah.
money is going into it?
Good question. Good question. No, good question.
Into the fund,
So-
how does it get there?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So in the first year, the proposal this year would be that we use some free cash,
Okay,
$200,000 of free cash to fund this. And that on an ongoing basis, there is a small amount, I think Jeff touched on this in one of the slides, there's a small amount of Medicaid money that gets turned back to free cash every year, like $30,000 or $40,000. That would, proposal we put that into this reserve fund.
So Medicaid money that's generated by the schools. would then go back.
Yes,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, would go back into this fund. So that,
Free cash.
goes free
it
cash.
goes right now, it goes,
Free cash or
No,
the town? Okay, all right, thank you.
yeah, it goes to the town.
Okay.
Well, there's only one free cash.
I was saying,
Okay.
doesn't free cash, right?
I was kind of thinking that's the next thing.
Meeting.
Yeah, so,
Regional school districts, we don't.
so keep in mind that, the hope is that, this is rarely used, right? So it would be invested, it would earn money, we'd have this Medicaid money going in, small amount of Medicaid money. And, because as Jeff said, you could have one one residential placement of a student could be $300,000. So really the 200 could be wiped out with just one student. That's, a lot of triggers have to happen for them to get to this money.
Right.
I think it's the proven thing to do. We're in a fortunate situation this year where we do have some free cash that we can allocate to this, and hopefully put in place a solution for a longer term solution. Yeah,
Steve, could there be a provision put in the criteria if the state does not offer extraordinary relief? Sometimes that would happen. Like they used to have pothole money, they called it, and they give you an email and they say, we're going to fund all of these different items to fill your pothole in your budget. And they stopped that, and then they went to extraordinary relief. So sometimes I'm just weird with the state that it may not be there. So if there's a provision within this that if the state does not offer extraordinary relief, is there a provision for the district to go to this? So that
we can certainly you know.
Kind of is.
that seems-
I mean, they have it.
It seems reasonable to
Yeah.
have it.
I think you would use the
Because-
same criteria that you would use to apply for the extraordinary relief.
Yeah.
So if it,
I think that's
Yeah,
fine. I just want to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
clear that sometimes the state doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, if
provide
they,
that
yeah,
money.
like the twin bill.
like if the state does something stupid like that,
Yeah.
and, but you still meet all the other criteria, right? The 25%.
It's the same thing. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think that would.
Yes, he calls it extraordinary.
We we just have to word the narrative of the article such that, you know, it deals with that concern. It's a good idea.
Should be extraordinary.
Okay.
Doesn't mean the same thing.
Can I ask a sort of process question that
Yeah.
may come across really stupid, but this is different. Was this not in what we reviewed last week? Is this in addition to that? We reviewed the last time we met, we reviewed a list of like 10.
It was on there.
Yes,
It was on.
yeah, this item was in the list of free cash.
Yeah.
Allocation, so we.
And a warrant was in that list of warrants we were planning to, there was like a
Yes,
stack
yes,
of warrants.
yeah.
And we're talking through this one in particular because they're here.
Otherwise,
Yeah,
it's-
yeah. Now, we'll talk about all of them eventually.
No, I was
but
just trying to
I
get
put this one on. the
Organized,
agenda
thank you.
Because they were here and it made sense to, you know, do it while.
Got
they're
it,
here.
thank you.
So I think, so the Municipal Modernization Act of 2016 is what allowed this fund to be created. And if you go back and look, there were a few towns that set it up right after 2016, but the number of towns that approved it in the last 3 years has exploded. So we're not the only ones who are facing the pressure of rising costs, particularly transportation. So, you know, all of our surrounding towns have followed this path as well.
Yeah, what was it? I heard Noah said was it $1.5 million over.
Million and a half override for special
To
education.
special ed. The problem that it's a statewide issue. So. And we're not gonna vote on anything tonight. I just wanted to kind of talk about it. Is there any other questions that people have on this?
I
Article?
don't have a question, but I just have like a pretty basic comment that like, you know, I saw all the things that Dr. Morrison said they can't fill. And I just think that this is a good idea because, you know, it kind of, we want to provide education to everyone in town with special needs and not special needs. And if you are faced with these volatile increases and you don't have a way in your town revenue to meet that, then you're inevitably going to have to cut other things. And so I know that's a really basic comment, but not being a
Yeah.
financial person like that, that's just like a,
It's
you
a very
know,
good comment.
Yeah.
that like this is a way for us to provide for everybody a little bit better,
Yeah.
you know, so. Really,
So I agree with you. I mean, I don't think that's a basic question at all. And I think that's one of the things that Jeff and I talked about. And we've been actually looking at it the other way. Is that if you have a child that moves in and the costs are extraordinary and you have to increase your basic operating budget for that, and then that student moves out of the district, you've already built that into the base of the budget. So this, I think, kind of smooths it out for everybody, whether too low or too high. I think it kind of just moves that out.
And when we do vote on this, this is sort of not in it. It is
Well,
separate.
no, there'll be, this is a rough draft. There'll be a,
And those two will be together.
yeah, there'll be well, in the warrant, there's usually a narrative.
Mhm,
And then the actual, this is the motion.
Right.
Basically.
basically.
Yeah, so there'll be a narrative that explains
This.
some of
This
this
is
stuff.
more process, not the narrative.
And then
Got
I think to memorialize that, usually when we create these funds, we create the capital stabilization fund or the municipal building stabilization fund, we would incorporate this into the financial policy.
Yeah.
So that everybody knows exactly why we passed the fund and what they used it.
That was a question I had, yeah.
Yeah, okay, that was my question too, because this has a different disbursement mechanism than.
Correct.
Right, if you still think it warrants to be included in the aggregate
I think so.
reserve.
In the, what you said, yeah. Oh, you mean the financial policy has
Policy has certain
certain.
funds
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that are aggregated to make the number that we compare to our
yeah,
policy, but most of those get allotted via all town meeting, but not this one.
right,
So it's a little different. This is just pointing that out categorically.
Yeah.
Different.
yeah. Yeah. Okay, all right, anything else on this?
Before we do the end of that, but, and so Christine, did you say this would or would not be, let's say there's 200,000 in there, would that go towards the total reserve meeting our criteria? Or benchmarks. Would that be part of it?
I think it would be.
Yeah.
I think you can make a case
Yeah.
to do
I
it.
think it would be. The reason why municipal building stabilization fund is not included in that is because it's a dedicated funding source from an override.
Right,
So that requires a much different change than a reallocation of this fund.
right.
Yeah, and in some
Yeah.
sense,
That's,
you know, you could argue it's actually easier to take money out of this than a town meeting requirement, right?
oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's very different.
Yeah. No, I think that's why it's important for it to be, you know, in the financial policies so that people have a, one repository to go to when they're looking for the rules and regulations we set up for these different funds.
So next year, let's pretend next year that we're operating at a deficit, and we sort of don't have a lot of free cash. Are we saying that we're gonna allocate a certain amount each year from the Medicaid, or that's something we can decide each year? Or how?
So, this initial 200 is a one-time.
Yeah, one-time shot. I got that. Moving forward.
The annual piece is the smaller like, Medicaid,
Yeah.
$40,000. If they don't have it in a year, then nothing.
So we're not gonna hard code that. We're just gonna sort of say, hey, we kind of think we can maybe use that number. Or we're gonna say in the warrant, moving forward, we're gonna take the Medicaid money and earmark it, or which is.
I think we need to have a dedicated funding for it.
Yeah, it'll be, you know, dedicated, that Medicaid piece will be dedicated to this fund.
Okay.
And if they don't have any in a particular year, nothing will go in.
But even if we have like a difficult deficit, we still have the sort of hard coded that
Yes,
the Medicaid
yes,
goes
it
in.
will always go in.
Okay.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And the interest in this fund,
Now there is a cap, there is a cap on this fund, so
Right.
once we get to the cap, you can't keep putting.
That's fine. I just was trying to make sure I was clear. So next year we're not fighting over weight.
and then any interest generated from the treasurer collector on this fund for investments must stay with this fund. So we'll also have some interest, not that it's a huge amount of money, but the interest investment income will stay with us. Right.
Okay. Let's move on our agenda items. Thank you guys very much.
Thank
you. Thank you,
You're
guys.
welcome to sit in our MBTA.
I am actually interested about it, but I think I'll just.
Also, you're probably interested in having nice dinner.
Tell me
right?
on Sunday.
I'll tell you on Sunday.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, Maria, you're up next.
Oh, this is from last time.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I don't remember it being there.
Yeah, completely great.
So we asked Maria, our planning, land use director.
Yeah.
To come to this evening. She's been intimately involved along with a consultant in this article. Has attended many, many meetings. And it's a complicated subject, so you might have read about it in the local news, that other towns get a lot of attention.
Mhm.
And so she's gonna give us remember, this is the 1.0 version of the subject. We'll have the final version of this later in April. So,
Thank you for the introduction. Like Steve said, I'm Maria de la Fuente, Director of Land Use and Planning for Medfield. And again, this is a very high level overview. I'm happy to touch base with you one-on-one if you want a little more detail. But Frank, if you want to bring us to the next slide. So we're going to be covering the process and schedule we've had so far, a bit of the introduction to MBTA Communities Act, and next steps, meaning what we're doing and the timeline that we're looking at in the next couple months.
Oh, sorry.
For dramatic effect. So this is the timeline today, just to give you an idea. This is something that the state has discussed since 2021 and slowly has been coming through to us. August 10, 2022 is when we really started seeing this come together for towns. That's when the final guidelines were issued by DHCD, now EOHLC. we've had submitted our interim action plan in January. And as you can see, there was a bit of a lull as my predecessor left and I came on board, but we continued the work in October 26th. We had info session for boards and committees. This was a very in-depth one-on-one with the Select Board, Planning Board, Affordable Housing Trust. We've had a public workshop in December where we got public feedback. There was a little exercise with Legos to get an idea of what people want density and how they want it. Then we had a Planning Board, Select Board meeting on January 22nd to discuss potential locations of the districts. And February 13th, another follow-up, and we have another one tomorrow as well. So there's been a lot of meetings, and every 2 weeks, the Planning Board has met to discuss this and give updates. So there's been a lot of work put into this. So for the overview, what is the MBTA Communities Act? So it's a new law established that establishes a requirement that each of the 177 designated MBTA communities must have a zoning district that provides for at least one district of reasonable size, which is described as at least 50 acres, in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right. And as of right means it could mean through a site plan approval, meaning that the planning board still has oversight over some things, and every other kind of board would still have to review the document, like Water and Sewer, Historical Commission, Conservation Commission. So there's still a lot of oversight over this. So as long as they meet reasonable criteria, the planning board has to approve it. But again, every other board has to make sure that they meet all the regulations. The housing cannot have age restrictions and has to be suitable for families with children. There has to be a minimum gross density of 15 dwelling units per acre. And this is entirely theoretical. You don't have to build the 15 dwelling units per acre. And part of this district has to be located within half a mile of a train station, which doesn't apply to Medfield. So why are we an MBTA community? We are considered an adjacent community because while we don't have an MBTA, towns that are near us do have it. So our compliance deadline as an adjacent community is December 31st of 2024. So what is the MBTA communities not apply for? So it is not a mandate to build housing. This is zoning, which is entirely a legal framework. It is not a housing production target. It is not restricted to only addressing affordable housing needs. It is not viewed as optional by the Attorney General. It is mandatory, and towns that have not complied have actually recently been served by the AGs. And it is also not a waiver or a fast track to development. Applications must still go through all applicable blocks. Next slide. So what are the implications if the town does not comply? The most significant implication is that we're going to lose access to major sources of grant funding. You can see a comprehensive list. I think it's 19 grants, and this is basically every significant portion of money that we could tap into would be out of our reach. Milton has actually had to give back money to the state in the past 2 weeks because of their non-compliance. And you can see the Attorney General's advisory guidance from March saying that communities that don't have a compliant multifamily zoning district must follow certain steps to demonstrate interim compliance. And if you fail to do that, you will be subject to civil enforcement action. And yes.
Oh, are we receiving any of these grants in Medfield today that you list?
Yes.
We are.
Yes.
I thought,
The big one is we just got approved for the MassWorks infrastructure project up at the state hospital for 4.5 million or something like that.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
And if I may point out,
More coming and more they want.
yes. So if we do not pass this zoning amendment, then Trinity and the NSH will be at risk because Trinity is asking for $30 million in grant funds. And without this compliance, we will not get it. So the state hospital project will be directly threatened if we don't find a way to comply.
you know, it would be, I mean, this is extra work, but we talked about in the previous meeting, the grants, et cetera, as a part of the school budget is $5 million. And then here we've got, there's a bunch of grants. You know, it would be nice if we had a number somehow on what grants are Or is it all grants or is it these grants on the page here?
Well, the ones that are at risk, if you don't
Yeah,
comply.
whatever's on that page,
On
yeah.
the page, yeah.
And-
And so which ones apply to Medfield? The big one we just talked about. I
That's
mean,
the big
that's the big kahuna in the world. That's the
Is
biggest.
the grant, is the
The Mass
Mass
Works,
Mass.
And
Works-
that's,
Mass Works Infrastructure Program. And,
housing works.
yeah, I mean, Christine, I don't know if you can talk to, are there any other smaller ones here?
Oh, Christine just left,
Oh,
but
sorry, she left.
we do have community planning grants. We've used them. I've got $70,000 for zoning consultants. Trying to think of which others I'm familiar with. I know.
I think in the past, sorry, I didn't go off.
No, go ahead.
I think in the past, the municipal vulnerability preparedness.
Yes.
As well, the one second from the bottom.
That's a big one for fire. The fire department relies on that one.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of public safety departments.
Yes, yes, yeah, sorry.
But maybe that's the point you could take away and maybe asterisk on this sheet, which ones,
Sure.
and apply to Medfield.
Yeah, and I could try to get you some estimates of the past year, how much we've
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Next slide. So compliance requirements. What do we need to do to comply? So there are 3 primary compliance tests that every MBTA community needs to complete. The first one is land area. We need to have at least 50 acres, 50% of which have to be contiguous. So 50% of 50 is 25, but if we make our districts 70 acres, then the number keeps climbing, so it's a moving target. Capacity is hypothetical building capacity, takes into account only developable land, meaning non-public and non-open space. You can still include it in your district, but it will not count towards it. And then zoning parameters such as lot size, dimensions, parking, open space, density restrictions, the things that go into how a building looks and fits within the lot. Next slide.
You're gonna see that it's quite a Rubik's Cube, I call it, to, when you get into each of these areas and putting it all together so that you have a compliant,
Yes, and there is a Excel spreadsheet that only few consultants seem to be able to handle. It's very complicated, but you input your parameters, and if you change one small thing, everything changes because everything is interconnected. So it's a very complex formula, and the state has provided their own database of eligible properties and eligible land. So there's a lot of information out there.
So Maria, have you looked at the town and thought about where this could be?
Yes, actually, we cover where the planning board of select board have been.
she'll go.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry.
So this is an example of compliant density right around downtown. This is 14 South Street. It has 4 units and it's on 0.26 acres. That means that it's 15 dwelling units per acre. There's obviously not 15 units on site, but that's what the calculation averages out to. So it's like a simple division process. So this is the kind of project that the planning board is hoping to attract. It's something that is currently existing in downtown and will blend in with the current buildings very well.
So that complies.
That complies. If you were to write zoning to create homes like this is what you would see. Again, this is.
But are we allowed to put that kind of restriction on it? Because, and maybe you're gonna get to this, but the fear is that because it's a by right rule.
Mhm.
I don't know, and maybe you're gonna tell us, but then I could say, and I want each dwelling to have no more than 4 units in it, as opposed to somebody comes in and says, I'm gonna put 100 units here. Right, so that's the question that maybe you're gonna answer, and maybe that's, because I think people are concerned not so much about that.
Mhm.
They're concerned about the thing that they were gonna put over across the street in Dale.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
So that's where dimensional requirements are important. How much you can put on a site, you might have no cap on density, but the site will naturally have a stopping point. There might be wetlands, there might be ledge, there might not be sewer nearby. So those things will naturally cap development at a certain level. And I will get into the parameters that we're currently looking at and the projected density, but it's still pretty mild. We're looking at areas of town that are already developed for the most part. So redevelopment is going to take a lot longer. And we're also looking at parts of town that have very small lot sizes. So if you have quarter of an acre, you can only put so many units there. You don't have 50 acres to put a huge thing
I thought 50% of our 50 acres had to be contiguous.
for the district. The parcels can be small. Parcels make up a district.
So for us, it's 25 acres, right? 50% of 50.
Yeah.
So 25 acres has to be contiguous.
A lot of these developers like to buy a contiguous plot.
Yes, yeah. No, you're right.
Okay.
I think you'll see kind of, the dilemma as she goes through it.
Yeah, and that's obviously it's a possibility, but then you would need to have multiple willing sellers in a very specific geographic area. It's definitely a barrier to larger developments too. We're zoning very small parcels exactly to try to promote smaller uses like this. Next slide. So zoning considerations. This is what we're currently looking at, and I will show you a map in a second. The Medfield Planning Board, in conjunction with the Select Board, have narrowed down the proposed MBTA district to the following areas. Frank, if you want to click that link below, it should take you to our map.
Sorry. Sure.
No worries. Awesome. So these are the areas that we're looking at. The one closer to this side is the park. It's the area of the park and adjacent. This is in the industrial extensive district. It's currently already housing, so we're not taking away from any industrial revenue. It's 9.2 acres and 7.0% of those, so 7 acres of those are eligible land. And I believe this one has a density of 22 units an acre, potentially. Again, you're looking at using the existing zoning. We're not changing any dimensional parameters in the industrial district. The only thing we're doing is actually allowing multifamily. Everything else remains the same. So it's a very minimal change. The next district is the core downtown. This is in the B zoning district, and this is the district that gives us our contiguity requirement. This is 28.4 acres, out of which 26 are eligible land. And I believe the density for this was 21 dwelling units an acre. And again, this is changing nothing. This is just allowing multifamily.
So that purple area, that's is town hall in the middle of it? It's going downtown.
Yes.
So this goes down where? From this,
We stopped just short of the Papagino's Plaza. I remember that.
It's down Prairie, close to.
Yeah.
oh, I see, that's Prairie off there to the left.
Yeah, sorry.
Close to that restaurant, right? And Basil's.
Basin's rather, yes.
And I think.
That's Papagino's that we excluded.
Oh, that's Papagino.
Yes, because we wanted that to remain commercial.
So that would be zoned for this,
Yes.
but I'm trying, and are there, and on all of that purple area, there are existing structures, are there not? There's no open land there.
Some of the green is the public land. It might be owned by the town or it might be open
So the
space.
dark green within the purple.
That doesn't count.
Yeah.
So if the town owns it,
Right.
you can't count that.
And it's only like 2 or so
Town-owned
acres.
land,
Yeah.
count for this purpose.
Yeah,
But like, are you getting at that there's not like open places to build stuff? They would have to be sold to build?
Yeah, so
Like-
the intent of what they tried to do was to not take open parcels and have massive development, right? They wanted to zone where there already was high density and count that, take credit for where there's already high density. So there's very little change, that's what they tried to do.
so it's zoned, but that's.
If you wanted to embrace the spirit of what
Right.
what the state wants you to do,
That's-
you would,
that's not-
you would, it's not
I
it.
mean, right, like,
You would take a big empty parcel down off of 27 and say, that's
Okay.
my 20 empty. And then you'd have a bunch of housing get developed and the school enrollment would go way up and our taxes would.
yeah,
be-
yeah.
That's what would happen if we embraced what the state wanted us to do.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, because this way, a person who owned a property down there would have to sell it.
You would
I'm
have
just
to,
surprised that that like meets the requirements. I'm not questioning it because I don't know what they are, but that seems like.
Well, the
surprising
big
that
one is, the big one is the 25 contiguous acres, right? That's the one. The rest of it, you can pick smaller parcels and they allow you to do that, but figuring out that 25 acres is the big one.
and the thing with zoning is that because it's entirely theoretical, the state cannot force us to build anything. There'll be an unfunded mandate, which they're not allowed to do. So the most they can do is say you have to zone for it. So we're zoning for it. And something I would also like to point out is that if you're familiar with the Butterfly Tree building in Salon 1, I think one of them has a density of 75 units an acre because it's on a tiny parcel and just has some apartments. And the other one has a density of like 25. And you look at them and you're like, they're down, it's a building in downtown. You don't think twice about it. You don't realize the density is 75 units an acre, which sounds super scary.
Oh, I know that.
So it's already there, and we're hoping to kind of keep it the same. And if there ever was something developed under this overlay district, then it'll be the same as the surrounding area.
But does that mean like that if the owner of that building
Mhm.
wanted to turn it into a restaurant, that they wouldn't be allowed because
No.
it's already been zoned for that many units?
So what we're doing here is going to be an overlay district. So there's two types of overlays. There's like the more restrictive kind, like aquifer protection overlay. So you have more restrictions for sensitive areas. And then you have the economic development overlays, which are less restrictive. So if I own a property in that district, then I can choose the base zoning, which is zone business, and I can have restaurants and retail and everything else. Or I can choose this MBTA overlay. So I'm not restricted to it. It's literally the developer's or the homeowner's choice to use it. If you don't want to, you don't have to. It's just an additional option. So it doesn't change anything already.
So
I
Maria,
don't know if that answers my question.
what's your question
I
again?
guess what I'm trying to understand is like, if the purple section gets approved as meeting this requirement,
Mhm.
it seems to me that what that would say is that those buildings that are owned by someone else
Right.
have been zoned to meet this requirement. And so they couldn't tear down a building with a high number of units per acre because then it wouldn't meet the requirement of this law to house as many people that are there currently. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just trying to understand what this does to existing structures, because it makes a lot more sense when you like zone an empty lot, like, all right,
Right.
yeah,
So-
like you can build a bunch of places, but what does that do to the owner of those buildings? And would that create an opposition, by those? I'm sure you've thought this through. I don't
Yeah.
understand
So-
what that does.
Zoning treats everything as if it was unbuilt. It does not care what's actually there. If you were to tear down the most dense development and put a restaurant in there, zoning does not care. You still comply because the law is still written.
Oh,
Yeah.
it seems kind of like a loophole almost to like call this.
Well,
Say that out loud.
like I said, zoning is just a set of legal options in this case. So it doesn't matter what actually gets built. As long as it's an option on paper, we're fine,
Got it.
we're compliant.
Okay, I'm just.
Yep, and you
Yeah.
can still.
Emily, you're asking the basic question a lot of people who are concerned about MBTA communities asking is that the state is requiring us to zone for this, but not requiring us to build any housing. And all we keep hearing with this is there's a housing crisis, there's a housing crisis. So, but this may and most likely will not lead to any producing housing.
Property, and they could sell it to another homeowner, or they could sell it to a developer. And
And-
the developer then could use it.
As long as the use meets the underlying zoning or the overlay district.
Right.
Correct,
So essentially they have two different zones they
right.
choose from.
Okay.
So you take this purple district here, if somebody could come in and over 20 years, buy up everything in that district. And then put the new zoning housing in there that they want. That would be very expensive, right? But technically they could do it.
Right.
They could also, could they go vertical, just straight up?
No, there's height restrictions.
So, Can you just explain, Montrose is not in there, right?
No, that's,
That's the green.
Is that the green area?
Brook Street,
The
Brook
green
Street and.
I believe so, just because it's a nonprofit.
Okay,
No, it is a
So-
nonprofit, sorry, it's educational, it's exempt.
so like, not Larkins, but what's the other? Takara and that whole development where Takara is.
I believe that's in the
That's that upper right piece, okay. And then.
I understand.
And then on the other side of North Street, you've got pretty much everything coming down to 109. Except for what's that the gray piece in the middle there? Is that the pond? Okay. And the
Sure.
there's like a cross in the middle, gray cross. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It's in the middle of the purple.
We can,
See where that dot is?
yeah,
To the
That's
right.
Montrose.
Yeah,
Right there.
No, that's
Oh.
not Montrose.
No.
Montrose is on the other side.
Meeting House Pond.
Oh, Meeting House Pond. That's Meeting House Pond. Okay.
and we can pull up the interactive Medfield maps if you would like.
No, that's okay. I just want to understand.
My sort of thing I wrote down about this when I first read it
Mhm.
was that this, the Medfield State Health Hospital eligibility is going to be known or not known by the time that we do the vote.
So we are not going to go forward with the state hospital because the state has not given us a stance on that. It would be very risky to try to push for it and then have the state deny us. They said that even if it meets the requirements on paper, they can still deny it because it's still publicly owned.
Because why?
It's publicly owned still. So
Oh.
if they wanted to, they could deny it. And
I know they've tried to get a positive answer from the state on that, and the state is reluctant to make an exception, as you can imagine, for any community, given what's going on with multiple communities around the state fighting this rule. So
Well, how is it an exception? What's the
because
exception?
it's technically owned by the town.
Public land is, you're not allowed to use.
You're not allowed to put that, to comply with this law, you can't use public land.
But the Trinity stuff doesn't count.
It's not sold to Trinity yet. And we have to pass this year. Like the zoning has to get passed this year.
Well, and the issue is, and this is where we get caught kind of in a catch-22, because we started this Trinity project way before MBTA zoning was a thing. The Trinity project is contingent upon public funding that if we don't pass the MBTA zoning, we will no longer be eligible for, and the Trinity project will not go forward.
So you catch 22.
Yeah,
Wow.
So it's really, we cannot risk it.
We have to
and if I can
comply.
get on my soapbox just for one more minute,
Go ahead.
what really frustrates me about this is that if we were allowed to use the state hospital, we are actually building 334 units of apartments and furthering the issue and addressing a housing crisis, especially in this area, by building these units where most of the towns and what you're seeing us propose won't construct them. So it's very frustrating, and I understand, and we've talked repeatedly with the state that they can't make an exception for us because of all of the other towns who are currently in the same process. And once they start to treat one town differently, they'll have to treat all of them differently. And they're holding all of us to the exact same standard. And for those of you who haven't seen, the Attorney General filed suit against Milton today.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Let's get more. Can you talk about the pink ones?
Yes, so this is Medfield Gardens. This is,
Which one, the one on the left or the right?
I believe so.
Right, so it's the right, it's right by Pleasant Street.
Yes,
The right is Medfield Gardens and the left is Metacomet?
yes.
Okay.
So, the zoning here is residential urban. So this is the only residential zone we have, but we have written the zoning in such a way that the density here will be 4.8 units an acre. It's way lower. So you could get a 5-unit home at most. So that way the contrast here won't be as large if anything gets developed. And these apartments are in relatively good condition. and already decently dense. So the incentive to redevelop is pretty low in this area. So we have zoned it at such a low density, taking into consideration that it is a residential district. And because the other districts are at 20 something units an acre, it averages out to 15.
And the other thing I'll add is that the Meta Comet is all condos. So to get control of that, you have to buy every single condo.
They're not all condos, a lot of
condos. Yeah.
But I just want to try to understand. So you mentioned plans for each of these, let's say, potentially each of these non-contiguous 3 parts, right? So it looks like it adds up to 50, right?
Yep.
And so I'm gathering that the planning board, despite the fact there are more hearings, that they're gravitating towards this. That's what we will be asked to vote upon here on the 9th and then in town meeting, right?
Correct.
Okay, and at that time, there'll be probably a very extensive document, right? Detailing the parameters
Yes.
that are in this overlay district. Will they be the same for each 3, or will each of these 3 have its own specific sub rule, right?
So there's multiple ways we can do it. I believe because they're not, you can create sub districts. In this case, they're all like separate. So we could create different parameters for each. I'm thinking that maybe the residential one might have its own, but we might refrain from, most of this is using the underlying zoning. So we're only want to tweak little things here and there. We want to implement design guidelines to make sure that the design is consistent with the area, parking requirements, little things like that. But for the most part, we're going to be using whatever's already existing. So it won't be a significant.
The state allows you to put those kinds of extra strings on it?
Yep, that's overlay district.
But, okay, that's great. But isn't it also the case that a developer could still use the 40B process to circumvent all of that?
Yeah,
right?
always. Until we're in safe harbor, which we're 40 units short.
The hospital application we did.
But the process for 40Bs is obviously, it's a very thorough, lengthy process for anyone to go through. People might want to choose their by right for-profit developments instead of a 40B, but it will be an option for them to use these parameters.
So what happened in Milton was all the people who lived in the places that were getting rezoned voted against it. And everybody who was not in those voted for it for the most part.
Yeah, we also keep in mind, Milton is an MBTA community.
Right.
Their rules are totally different.
We're adjacent.
Yes,
Right.
they're much stricter, much more zoning and.
I need 1,500.
Right. But so that's not here or there, but it's not Milton. But I mean, what does it have to pass with it? 50 plus 1? 2/3? What is it?
2/3.
Wow.
This is I think. Sorry, no, I'm sorry. It's simple majority. I'm so sorry. Housing is a simple majority vote.
Simple majority?
Simple majority. I am sorry. Yes. The state changed that. Like I gave you a heart attack. So see if you're awake.
Plus 1%.
It's not so bad. 50 plus 1.
Yes.
All right,
Yep.
that's not as bad as 2/3.
Yes.
Okay.
See if you were paying attention.
That is a bad.
That additional 16, 17 is really tough to get.
So
Yeah, this.
if you want to revert back to the presentation, I have more of the density calculations in there. It's a general overview.
I mean, but Bob and I went to one of these workshops they had, and we sat at the same table, and there were like 7 different tables,
Uh-huh.
and there were 6 or 7 different solutions.
Yeah, but there's
And
only
they-
one vote.
And they were all, some of them were, like I suggested, let's embrace what the
Yeah,
FBA
yeah.
wants to do, let's pick up these lots, and, I mean, it was interesting. But I'm happy that they've come to this, the solution we thought was the best was something like this, where there's minimal impact to existing housing in town, and taking advantage of where the density is today. Because as you can imagine, getting, if you pick one big lot, you upset people in that neighborhood, right?
Yes. It's open season.
So it's a bit of a, you know, like I said, the Rubik's Cube to navigate there.
Yeah, it's gonna be a difficult conversation.
Yeah.
Well, but I think like Christine made a really good point that I think we have a good, I don't want to say out, but we have a good story to tell that we as a town have the hospital and we are building places there. So it's not like, you know, I know I said the
Well,
word that I got like an eyeball about earlier, but I wasn't like, I just meant that to call this like it is, because that's how I talk.
Yeah.
But like, it's not like we're just like completely shutting people out of the town. Like we are doing that, and that had a lot of the
Right.
same, you know, I don't know what word I'm looking for, but the same idea behind it. You know, the same end result. And yeah, it's not wise to like have the population increase a ton. I think we can probably all agree on that. But so the people that are against it for the reasons that we're not going with the spirit of the law, we can say that we have that.
Right.
And not something that we did.
It's just
That
a
does
timing,
kind
it's
of
a timing.
be it.
Yes.
no, but alternately, we set ourselves up to have twice as much multifamily home housing as the law even asks for.
But we're not really, because we're
Because we
doing
have
all of
a-
these.
We have a state hospital that doesn't count. We're like sleepwalking into.
Yeah, but
So
keep in
that
mind,
would be if
we
this zone was
we
like
thought
on the
that
next
was the
block.
best solution.
Like-
even
I know, I thought it was a good
without-
solution.
Without,
Yeah.
you know, this.
I'm just saying that's an opinion,
Right,
right?
we had to deal with that liability somehow.
Right.
So,
But we can make a statement, I think, and I'm new here, so maybe you could correct me, but like in our opinion about this article, assuming that is an article, that we aren't doing what you're saying. We would be doing what you're saying if Maria had zoned a empty lot. And then we were double dipping or whatever you want to call it, but that is not what this is. So that opinion that you're saying, I don't know who would have that, because it doesn't make any sense to me,
Okay.
but, you know, interesting, you disagree, but I don't see what you're saying.
The planning board has been,
Yeah, like that smart way to approach it.
Yeah.
the planning board has been very careful, and they of course have more knowledge of Medfield than I do, being only pretty new here. But they have looked at individual parcels, the state of those developments, when they were built, if they were condos or not. They have taken all of the factors into consideration to minimize future impacts. And they've also taken into consideration traffic. That's why most of our district are located in the downtown, is so people can actually walk to restaurants and not have to drive in and take up the already congested or, you know, limited parking spaces there. A lot of the results in the workshop were let's zone around town and have, you know, near Walpole, near this, near that, but then everyone will have to drive in to support local businesses in the downtown. And that's what the planning board wanted to avoid, which is why it's pretty centralized there. So they really put a lot of thought into this.
On the last line there, the density per acre.
Mhm.
So if I understand what you were saying, particularly regarding just most recently about Medfield Gardens parcel there, you were saying that the language would be written such that the max density per acre would be set at 4.8. Did I hear you correctly say? And likewise in the other two areas at 21.5 or?
Yeah, so this is plugging in, not that we're gonna say 4.8 and no more, right? It's you're putting in the certain height, certain lot coverage, certain setbacks, that this is what the calculator that the state gave us has resulted in.
Okay.
So you can go up to 4.8. A site may be very ledgy or very wet, and you can only really put 3, then you get 3.
Okay.
The
So-
4.8 is like the worst case.
And then you just a simple multiplication gives you the next to last line, which is the number of potential units that could be there do we have a target for that number?
Yes, so we have to meet 750 hypothetical units.
Right.
Out of which this would give us 807. The state has been being very watchful of what you zone and questioning certain parcels and their developability. So we want to have a little bit of a buffer in case they come back with something.
But the state has already looked at this.
No, not yet,
Nothing. They've never. Okay.
because we need to submit, we're in the process of choosing a district, then we need to write the zoning. Then we can send something into the state for preliminary review, but most likely they'll review it when we submit it at town meeting. The timelines is very,
So you have to get it approved by the state prior to town meeting.
No, it's town meeting approves it, then EOHLC.
And then they could reject it, state. And
Yeah.
say, we don't like the way you're doing it.
They could, but I think this meets all of the criteria. I think
Okay.
this is a very safe option, and then our consultant thinks so as well.
Good.
And I think, Maria, correct me if I'm wrong, we are in interim compliance until December
Yes,
of 2024. So if for whatever reason this failed at town meeting, it gives us a little buffer of time to bring something back again before that interim compliance expires.
yes. That's our,
We just have somebody that's raised their hand.
sure.
Online, so one. John Christo. I'm gonna allow you to talk. If you can unmute yourself.
Thank you
and
very much.
give us
So I'm
your
a little
address.
new to this. Can you hear me?
Yeah, could you give us your address?
John
Name and
Christos,
address?
Stewart Street, Medfield.
Thank you.
I'd like to know what the difference is between an adjacent community where Medfield has to zone for 750 additional units versus an adjacent small community that Dover has next door, an abutting town.
So the requirements for adjacent small communities are less. The amount of units that they have to hypothetically produce is also less. It just adjusts to the number of year-round housing units that they have.
Say that one more time.
So if it's a small community, then it's depending on the number of year-round units that the community has. So they wouldn't have 750 units as a blanket statement. They will have a lesser number because they're a smaller community.
What's a year-round unit versus a?
Not really an issue in Medfield because we're not a Cape Cod. So basically every unit here will be a year-round unit. So how many households?
So would Dover though, right?
Yes,
But with Dover, they're not even close to any MBTA, they're not close to anything. Are they, do they have to abide by this as well?
I believe so. I think they're the small town.
I think they were 110 units versus 750 for Medfield. That's not too equitable.
Yes. Well, that's because if the formulas for them are actually on the state website, if you would like to take a look at them.
I did look at it.
Sorry?
I looked at it and I saw 110 versus 750.
Mm-hmm.
So
I don't
has
think we can-
any analysis been done, Maria, on the impact that 750 additional units will have on our school systems, police, fire, water infrastructure?
So it will not be 750 additional units because there's already existing units in those sites. So it would be an incremental change, not add 750. And I think that for schools that if you want to send me an email, I'm happy to send you some studies that the region has done of the last 5 fiscal years, 300 school districts. There is no tangible or significant financial impact or correlation between more housing and more school enrollments. There's different factors that affect that and not necessarily more housing production.
So you're
So, for
telling me
example,
that you're telling me if you increase our housing production by 750 units, most likely, I'm guessing that's 2,000 additional people. That won't have any impact on our property taxes, on the police.
John, take for example, on the screen, the park. Okay, that complex has, I don't know how many units, but there's already, it's a apartment complex, right? So, I don't know, maybe there's 140 units there already. The zoning is maybe going up by 10. So there's only an increment of 10 units. You have to take into account the existing housing in each of these sub-districts.
Correct. There's stuff already there. So you're really looking at redevelopment of properties, which takes a long, long time to come into fruition. And most of these sites chosen, like I said, are already developed or pretty new and are not likely to be developed anytime soon. We've also tried to match the density to what's existing. I think the park has a density of 10 units an acre. So it's already pretty high. It's already very close to compliance. So the incentive to redevelop that is very low.
So I have family and friends in Milton, and you talked about density. And you talked about abutting sites and so forth. In Milton, they could go into a cul-de-sac that's, close to a train station and buy one house, and then the developer could be incentivized to buy the house next door, knock both down, and subsequently build an 18-unit apartment complex. Would that be possible? Would that?
Yeah, I can't.
I wish you wouldn't interrupt me. What's your name?
I'm sorry, John, it's nobody here. It's the police station that's making an announcement. So we're having a meeting at the public safety building. So just bear with us. Okay, now it's over.
So could that happen, Maria, in Medfield?
John, I'll let Maria answer this, but we don't want to get into a long discussion about Milton's issues. We're talking about our own article here tonight. So
The rules, and what's your name, sir?
Steve Callahan.
Steve, I think the rules are applicable to both towns in terms of density and development.
Yes, but we're not voting on Milton's problem.
No, but I'm asking a question. If they could conceivably buy one house, say on Pleasant Street or Miller Street, and buy a budding house next door, a developer, and then build a sizable 18-unit apartment building.
So we cannot control who decides to sell their homes. That will be up to the individual property owners. If the residents or business owners are willing to sell to the developer, then yes, that's same as everything really. We cannot control private transactions. And they would still need to comply with our existing dimension requirements, which would again cap density at a certain level. They would need to comply with our design guidelines. There will be certain standards that need to be met.
But any developer can buy any private property at any time and develop in accordance with the zoning.
Or 40B.
Or 40B, yeah.
40B. So does that answer your question?
Well, it's a trump card for a developer to, buy in one of those areas that's dense, and they could, put up additional housing.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a huge.
Well, it takes a willing seller and a willing buyer. It takes two. People might not be willing to sell.
But anyway, that's what it's zoned for, and so that's the intent of the zone.
Yeah.
That's all zoning works that way, though. I mean, okay, so I think we answered your question, and I think we're going to move on.
Okay.
To
We can move on to the next slide. Discussion and next steps. So if you're interested in providing input, I highly encourage you to join one of our regularly scheduled meetings. The planning board and select board are still actively meeting. Our next one is tomorrow night at 7:30. We're going to be finalizing the potential MBTA district locations. It's important that we choose the locations by tomorrow night because we need to start moving on to writing the design guidelines for this districts. So the link to you can find a copy of the meeting materials here in the PowerPoint. You can also go to the Agenda Center. Our next meeting on this topic specifically is going to be March 18 at 7:30. It's going to be an in-person public workshop at the Public Safety Building. This will be with our consultant who will walk us through the districts that we've chosen and the draft design guidelines and dimensional requirements that we will have. The next one after that is March 28th at 7:30 p.m. This is the first planning board hearing advertising the bylaw change. It'll be continued on to April 1st for the second planning board hearing. April 8th is when our warrant language is due for printing. May 6th is our town meeting, which gives us a little bit of a buffer for EOHLC to take a look at our zoning and hopefully approve it in time for our December 31st, 2024 compliance deadline. And we do have that buffer so that if anything were to happen, we need to revisit our zoning. We could potentially call an emergency fall town meeting, get everything buttoned up real quick and submit again, and we would still be.
So any resident could go to your public hearing.
Yes.
You're having two of them and ask questions and get answers from the planning board and yourself.
Yes, correct. So the one tomorrow is obviously the closest one. The link is already posted, so you can get it on your calendars.
And they could attend those hybridly too, like over Zoom.
The one tomorrow is entirely, it's only Zoom.
Always. on.
Only Zoom. The one on March 18th is going to be in person. You can listen in hybridly, but if you want to participate, it's really better if you're here in person. And the other first and second planning board hearings are entirely on Zoom.
One question I had was, I was expecting that it was just going to be up in a more of a commercial area that's already commercially zoned. We just flip it into this zoning. I was surprised that some of the commercial areas, like up by sort of Willis Avenue and Sluggers Academy and up that way, was sort of not considered.
So the reason for that is that one of the select board goals is to have 10% of our revenue come from non-residential sources. So we're trying to protect our existing commercial as much as possible. The next year, the planning board is hoping to pass a mixed use overlay district to try to, you can still have multifamily, but there's also a business component. So we're trying not to cannibalize our businesses with housing.
Plus when you do that, let's say it's owned by one owner. That whole place you just mentioned.
No,
I don't know, just say it is, I don't know if it is, but say there's one owner of it. You split just like that. You could have
An entire plaza.
As opposed to like a Metacommon situation where there's already housing there. You're not increasing.
I was just surprised by that.
Drastically the housing. With this approach. That's why I like it. It's taking advantage of where we have existing high density housing,
Correct.
not overly embracing the spirit of this law and creating lots of new housing.
Cautiously compliant.
Very well said.
Can I ask Maria a quick question?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Maria, do you know if, say, 2 years from now, has the state given any guidance as to, let's say we decide, well, we made a mistake with this and we want to change one small component of this and we want to go back to town meeting and maybe swap a district. Would we have to go through that whole review process with the state again, or do they allow for small, or do they not know yet because this is so early?
I don't think they have issued any guidelines on that yet. I expect it to be the same process, same as any zoning change. The AG's office still needs to review it, so I think it'll be kind of like a joint process. But we can certainly revisit this if we find it's not working out, as long as we need the 3 components for compliance.
How about questions from committee? Anyone else have any questions? Is this your last slide?
I believe so.
Okay. I mean, what do people think?
You in there.
We'll have another shot at this again.
Well, I would just say that, we did the, what's it called, the inclusive housing, the thing where you.
Inclusionary zoning?
Yeah, we did that a few years ago, right? And it at the town meeting, it did require some explanation. Will you be there to explain, or are you expecting us to do it?
No, our consultant will be there.
Okay.
Yes, and
That's good.
And because it's a zoning article, the planning board will be required to report on it as well.
Okay.
yes, there'll be plenty of documentation and
We'll
people's help.
have a report, obviously, but the bulk of the presentation will, heavy lifting will be done by then.
Do we think we need like a contingency plan or a fallback plan or this is what this is going to cost us if you guys don't vote for it? I feel like it's a little bit like, do you like this plan or not? And people are like, boo, I hate it. But if you say, well, it's going to cost us $10 million a year, if you say no.
Yeah.
No, I definitely think that's.
I just
smart.
think that like, what is the cost of a no might be a
Yeah.
useful guideline, because I don't know what it is.
Right now, I think that's.
All the grants that we lose.
I
Yeah.
think that's a good point, is that there needs to be part of whoever does the presentation, that there needs to be a discussion of what's the implication of a no vote.
Yeah, at least $10 million a year and losing the state hospital redevelopment.
I think you're gonna lose what is your school MSBA? That's gonna go out the window too.
Yeah.
So we should have an itemized, like, all this goes sideways if all this, on door number 1, we had door number 2, I mean, just to be transparent, right? So it's like the cost of no is a little bit more transparent.
Well, that's true, and it's going to be hard to calculate some of that, because if we off the bat lose our math works funding, which means the Trinity project, we can't do the public infrastructure, and Trinity will most likely walk. I don't want to speak
Right.
for them, but
Yeah.
this project is contingent upon the public infrastructure. If we lose that, we then have at least a $25 million liability in the buildings that are up at the state hospital. We would need assistance through grant funding to
From
be
the
able to
state.
do something
Right.
with that, and we would no longer be eligible. So
Well, that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
We should
I mean,
outline those.
no,
things.
it.
Oh, yeah, we-
To snowball.
When we
once you
passed,
don't-
when we passed the state hospital, that was one of the big reasons we
Yeah.
made was we got rid of that $20 million liability.
Yeah.
So it comes back.
Yeah, I think honestly, the planning board has done an excellent job picking districts that, again, comply, but are minimally impactful to the town. And if you have any additional concerns, you can always email me, or I can let you know of the upcoming meetings. I'll be very happy to keep you in the loop if you'd like to participate.
Yeah, I think you got, and I can tell you recognized early on this needed a lot of outreach and communication. And I would just encourage you to do as much of that as you can,
Yes.
because unfortunately, it's gotten very political around the state. And
Mhm.
people just read stuff and they don't necessarily know the details of their particular situation.
Yes.
So people get reactive.
Yeah, I didn't know until today that the state hospital wasn't going to be approved prior to the vote. I thought that was, that was news to me.
Yeah, we're doing extensive public outreach. When the time for the public hearings come, I will be emailing every abutter within 300 feet of all of those districts. I think it's going to be over like 1,000 mailers, honestly. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be advertised on TV, posting on every public building. Chris is helping me on her blog.
Sorry.
Every house in Medfield should get a flyer explaining
They will for a town meeting,
what town meeting.
but these are mailers to the hearings because it affects only specific areas.
Right.
It's 300 feet from there. For the public hearing, and again, I'll be advertised as much as I can. The mailers will come to every house when the warrant is printed.
Okay. Are we all set with Maria?
Awesome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you.
I think just a real quick, we have very minor things to. We're going over our 9 o'clock limit, I apologize, but I know Brent couldn't make it to the capital budget committee. I did go, I did attend and just to listen in, and they basically they had a number of agenda items, and I think the biggest one was that they moved forward the item on the parking lot, the McCarthy parking lot. They moved that forward from 26 to 25. So when they submit that capital budget, final capital budget, that will be in there. And but that is being funded by the Park and Rec revolver. And the tennis courts, I think they approved an additional $30,000. $30,000 because of the cut in state funding for that. They had an earmark that got cut, so they needed to, in order to keep the part that they didn't cut, take advantage of that and move that project forward. They needed to keep it on schedule, and so they came up with 30,000 from the capital project. They got the MS. Did that come on municipal building stabilization? I think it was
Capital statement.
Capital stabilization.
Additional 60 out of the Parks
Revolving. Yeah,
Is that the comment?
that's the lighting that common 10 sports.
Okay, didn't you say that to do the one at the high school like, earlier in the year? That you found out that was in your, I just like found out.
Oh, no, that's this one right behind the public safety
Yeah,
building.
right over there.
Yeah, this
Oh,
one right here.
okay,
No, I found out I was a proud owner of that one.
right, so what happened to that?
It's in the plan for this year.
Oh,
For
cool,
fiscal year
okay.
25.
Okay.
And they did approve funding the Tri-County new building school costs out of the municipal building stabilization fund. And so that's like a $6,000 the first year it's 6,000. And I think it's around 20,000 a year after that. So that will come out of the municipal stabilization fund. Those are the big items. Anything you wanted to update us on, Christine?
No, I think that covers pretty much everything.
Okay. I will entertain a motion to adjourn unless there's anything else.
Some move.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?